Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, Gino Medina, and you are listening to Sound Advice. This is a podcast developed by working musicians, specifically for working musicians. And if you want to know what I mean by working musician, I mean if your primary source of income or your only source of income is pounding the pavement with your guitar, your bass, or playing a gig week after week after week after week, then this is the show for you. I want to help all of you navigate your career in this crazy-ass musical landscape we find ourselves in. And I want to do that by enlisting the help of fellow musicians just like us who find themselves in very unique musical positions. Let me start by giving you a little background about myself really, really briefly, and then we'll get on with the show. I started playing professionally in clubs with my uncle's band when I was 12 years old, I think, which was about 30-some years ago. Maybe longer, I won't tell. And I found myself making up to $150 a week just playing in his band. When I turned 16, I worked at a grocery store and made about $80 a week, and that sucked by comparison because I was there pretty much 3 or 4 days a week. So somewhere around that time, I decided, music's the way I want to make my living. So ran off, joined a band, put out a couple records, and then we changed formats. We became a different kind of band. And put out a couple more records. And actually, you can find those records on Spotify. You can look for Azure, A-Z-U-R-E, Azure. The other band was Hard Left, H-A-R-D-L-E-F-T. You can find both of those bands again on Spotify and listen to your heart's content. But in my later years, I started a corporate band. We played a lot of festivals and weddings, and that was my primary source of income for the better part of about 6 or 7 years. And so now I find myself in the middle of nowhere, which I love. And my primary source of income still is making music. And even in this pandemic era, I have managed to keep about 5 to 6 gigs a month on my calendar. I really don't know how I managed to do that specifically. But what I can tell you is that there are other working musicians out there who are very conscientious of the position they find themselves in. They know how they got there, they know how to maintain it, and they found ways to adapt and survive in this ever-changing climate. And my goal here is to help working musicians out there, and myself too, to be quite honest, to continue to, again, navigate these treacherous roads that we take as working musicians. And I want to enlist the help of other working musicians to achieve this goal. So our first guest today is a gentleman named Matt Maxwell. He is an American musician. He's got over a decade of experience in the studio and touring with a national group. He's performed alongside of some of music's biggest names, and he has got a great reputation for being a go-to kind of guy. Matt was kind enough to join me earlier and share his experiences with us. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this portion of the show over to our interview, and I'm going to let you guys meet Matt Maxwell, bassist extraordinaire, and then we'll talk more after the interview is over. So sit back, enjoy, and let's see what Matt has to say. Matt, thanks for joining us today. It's good to have you here. What's going on with you in this holiday COVID season as a musician? Are you doing anything to keep yourself busy?
Yeah, trying to. Some stuff at home. I do a church gig here in Oklahoma where I live. And we had some church services. And then I've got a New Year's Eve gig, a socially distanced kind of vibe at the Cain's Ballroom. Yeah, man. And just stuff from home. I do bass tracks from home. And then probably like everybody trying to find other avenues and creative ways to maximize all of my free time, because there's a lot of it because I'm not touring or any of that stuff. Splice, you name it, I've looked into it.
So as a bassist in particular, but just as a sideman, what does it take to survive as a sideman? Like, do you have a process for approaching different gigs? How do you seek out those gigs? Your fight or flight response as a musician, especially when that when it kicks in, what do you see yourself doing to make ends meet?
Man, especially in the most recent years, having at least somewhat of a social media presence, not inundating people, but just keeping my name out there, because so many people are on Facebook or Instagram, and I do both. There are others, but those are the two main ones. So I'll do a little video of myself playing at home, and I've been doing that for a few years now. And what'll happen is someone will say, great job or whatever. And someone that you may have never even met that's in your same town, it establishes even just like a little bit of a rapport, which is great. So then when you meet them, it builds on that. And anyways, it's just it's almost like a musical introduction without having to, I think of it like a billboard. People are cruising the highway of Facebook and they see your billboard. That's great. So a little bit of that, taking really just any opportunity or any gig within reason that I can, because then those people know people that know people, etc. So just utilizing what's immediately in front of me, even if I don't think it will, within reason, monetarily pay off big time. It's like, okay, I go do this singer-songwriter gig in Texas. Okay, I made enough to justify it. Maybe I didn't make my highest thing in my head. But then when they go into the studio to record, they go, man, I liked that guy. He sounded very pro, which this has happened several times. I want him to record on my album. So then that begets a little bit of studio work when they release their EP or whatever. So
just to expand on what you're saying, you're not necessarily counting your survival in terms of monetary gain. If I understand you correctly, the money is, obviously it's something we all need to get by, but is that a motivating factor more so than the chance to build those? Because what you're essentially talking about are relationships. Not just musical relationships, but relationships with other people to build on. How much of that is, when you take a gig, for instance, in Texas, singer-songwriter thing, let's use that example. If you take that gig, and I have no idea what you get paid for that, so I'm just going to arbitrarily throw out a number. Let's say they ask you to drive 3 hours to Dallas to do a $300 show. Mm-hmm. Is it, okay, cool, that's decent money, I'll do it? And then when you get there, oh, hey, look, these guys are pretty cool. Or is it, yeah, the money's what I expected, but this is what I'm hoping to do? I mean, are you always looking for that next step forward? Or, are you budgeting from step to step? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And that's an awesome question. That's some of the nitty gritty stuff you were kind of talking about that you want to hope to, shed some light on in this podcast. Anyways, awesome question. So to me, and I don't have a prepared answer, so bear with me, but it's kind of a conglomeration of different factors. It's like, do I have anything going on the next day or the day before? Can I devote enough time to do a good job? Do I have a higher paying gig later, et cetera? So if I don't have anything going on, I might be a little more likely to do that because A, I'm, may need the money, but B, I have the energy to drive those extra hours, which, as you know, takes time and focus and food, and you're tired. And so I think it depends. What's that?
A lot of suicide runs. I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah. So, it depends on some of those things, but if I see a rate like that and I have enough time, and, I'm 34, I'm married. So that factors in now too. Now, if I were 18, man, for me, I didn't start gigging until, like really gigging until I played some at 18 and 19, but kind of the early 20s, for me, my early 20s. And so back then when I was 21, I was much more likely to just go, yeah, I'll do it. And then come what may. So yes, you're right. What motivated it was getting out there, getting my feet wet, paying some dues, and not worrying about the money as much as so now it's dialed the other way a little bit, kind of a gradient. Like we're there, it was green, here we go. It's kind of getting into like almost the yellow a little bit for me. So the money does factor in a little bit more, but I think as long as I have my anchor points, so to speak, like a band that goes and does an anchor gig in Dallas to play one in the middle of nowhere. Like I have these like bigger shows that I kind of anchor these peripheral networking gigs, so to speak, to. Okay. So it's changed over the years, but yeah, in general, it's a little bit more of, networking into the money being a close second.
Yeah. From my own experience, I totally get what you're saying about, the youthfulness and the spontaneity that coincides with that. I like to think of it in terms of spontaneity, but I kind of wonder sometimes, and I don't know if this was your experience or not, but did you ever get the sense that what you were doing may have been out of either naivety or just stupidity or
both?
All those things come together, it creates a perfect storm. And I think that's kind of how some of us get our start. But specifically, how did you get into being a musician? And when did you go from gigging because you dig it to gigging as a way of a means to an end? And then what was that process like for you?
Gotcha. The first thing that comes to my mind is I had a guy when I was going to college around 18 that was kind of a mentor that kind of mentally prepared me for some of that, even though it would be a year or two until I really started doing it a little bit more. So I kind of, from him, learned it is possible. You do have to be open. He kind of opened my mind to like, be willing to take, maybe something that you wouldn't, if you want to work all the time. Anyway, so he planted the seed, and then I moved to where I live now. And there's a bit of a scene here. And so I started working at a music store, and I got to meet the jazz guys and the classical guys. It's like a full blown, they got the sheet music section, the repair shop, the guitar shop. So I'm pretty gregarious. I'd just go around and start asking questions. And, I played for a little bit. I had some experience. But anyway, so these guys would say, hey, man, you're a bass player. You should do this. You should learn to read better. You should do this. Just giving little bits of advice. And I just kind of took it to heart. So anyways, on my lunch break, I'd be learning to read. Of a night, I'd be working on whatever riffs. So, learn to read music. And so then that opens up other possibilities, jazz gigs, last minute gigs, a wedding. I was reading on a wedding that you and I played together, et cetera. So, these guys planted some more seeds that I then watered. And so anyways, about a year or two into working at that music store, I was, 21, 22. I got a call because I would go out and go to a jam session. I'd meet a guy, I was just doing everything I knew to do in somewhat of a medium-sized market.
Just kind of old-fashioned hustle, right? Like an old-fashioned.
Yeah. And I wasn't doing any videos or anything then, so I just kind of was just out pounding the pavement, so to speak. And then a lot of it, like you said, kind of innocently, I was just like, I don't know, I'm not doing nothing else. I'll go to a jam. I'll go jam with my buddy in his basement. That buddy knows this buddy. And then he calls me for a gig. So anyways, eventually a guy called me it's a guitar player who now lives in Austin. And man, he was as good a guitar player as he was as picking up the phone and hustling up gigs. So that was good for me as a side man. So he said, hey man, I work a lot. It's a cover gig. We play bars. It's a trio, just dirty. Here we go. Jump in the van. And so, man, I said, yeah, absolutely. So I did that for a couple of years. And while I was doing that, I would pick up another little local theater gig. I would do, just really anything that came along. And slowly I moved to part-time at the music store. And then full-time music. I quit the music store with like some of those anchor gigs. I had a church gig that was paying well. I was playing these bar gigs with him. Sometimes some sleepless nights. But as you mentioned earlier, when you're younger, I was 18, 19, 20, 21. It was like, whatever.
Yeah, you mentioned energy. Nowadays, it's energy, logistics, timing, money, and the potential for networking and building relationships. Now, back then, like when I was in my 20s, for me, it was pretty much the same thing. Yeah, let's go. Let me grab my orange distortion pedal. There was a time when all I owned was an orange distortion pedal, and I was gigging every week. I would borrow everybody else's gear, but that kind of brings me to my question. There are a lot of great bass players. What's required of someone to go? You mentioned anchor gigs too, which I assume those are those reliable gigs you can depend on, on a regular, consistent basis. But to survive as a sideman, now you've done more than just corporate work or bar work. You've actually gone on the road with Lauren Elaine. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Currently her bass player.
Now, I don't know about you, but the 20 feet from stardom kind of thing, I'm cool with that. What did it in your mind? What do you think got you that particular gig? And can you tell us a little bit about the experience once you got on board? What was it relative to what your expectations were? And then how did it help you develop even further as a musician or a side guy? And did it create any aspirations for you to step out in front of the microphone or out front of the stage or anything to that effect? A lot to unpack there, so take your time. I'm curious what that arc is, or where you're at in that journey and what you see for yourself beyond that.
Right on, man. Yeah, I'll jump into it and give me some bumper guards if I get too far into the weeds. I'm bad about that. So basically, with that specific gig being Lauren, kind of what it takes to kind of get to that space, and then does it give me any kind of forward momentum into other realms? Is that kind of the?
Yeah, that's pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. And granted, this has been an exceptional year. I think if we hadn't had the issues we've had facing us with regards to the pandemic specifically, it's possible I mean, I've seen her Spotify numbers. I've listened to her songs. It's very likely that she could be out on the road right about now.
Oh yeah,
and which I hope to mean that you would probably be out there as well, still, jam with it. But you understand what I'm saying.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So like I say, I'm in what I would call a medium-sized market as far as the music scene here in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Great players, great scene. But, obviously we all know the three big ones before the pandemic. Don't want to speak before, now and in the future. But anyways, so, I knew that I wanted to play music. I knew that I wanted to be a sideman. I knew that I was going to have to do a good job consistently. Have to be okay with some sleepless nights and not a lot of money. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll do that. Started saying yes to everything. It started compounding. I started doing as good a job as I could. If I didn't have a skill, I would just spend the whole week working on that skill, whatever I needed to do. Anyways, there are a lot of people that move from Oklahoma to Nashville, and other places. But yeah. Anyway, so, I'm playing in these groups. I shouldn't say little. I'm playing in these bands that are local, regional, etc. And, this guy that knows this guy. And, I played with the Swan Brothers. They're from Muskogee. Great country music duo, great harmonies, awesome musicians and guys. Funny side note, one of them's a great bass player. So, man, my job was, I had to be on my game.
That's kind of like Taylor Hawkins playing drums for Taylor Hawkins. Foo Fighters. Oh man. That would be
and so they knew someone that I played with, and their drummer set in with that band. That drummer went, "Oh, that guy's great." He happened to be their band leader. Their bass player left. Hey man, they were actually out on the Carrie Underwood tour, and they're like, "Hey man, you want to come?" So that was my first arena gig. That was 5 years ago, I believe. And I said, "Sure." Yeah.
A lot of that is more than just your playing. I mean, that
right.
on its face sounds like that's the benefit of all the hustling and all the networking and building the rapport that you mentioned. So getting your foot in the door is one thing. I've had opportunities where, okay, yeah, you could do this gig and it could have potentially led to something else, but something wasn't right. Either it wasn't a good fit, the chemistry or whatever, the styles or, something didn't quite click. And it wasn't, you guys suck, you're an a-hole, just some things just don't mesh. The Beatles with Pete Best, they were just, a bar band, but then when Ringo joined, I mean, they felt an instant difference. So getting beyond that point, once you get your foot in the door, what steps do you have to take, not only to get acclimated, but to solidify your position in that role?
Great question. For me, a little bit of my personality is this way anyways, but really just being a team player. Mm-hmm. And if they need you to do something, if they ask something of you, just being willing to smile, especially when you're on the road, not every day you wake up like, oh, the sun is out. So you just do your best to go, you know what, we're working. This is great. Just kind of this reevaluation each day of like how thankful you are, and just a positive mental attitude. I mean, I've never ran a company, but I can imagine on that side of things, everything just flows so much better, if you have a healthy environment, everyone's, again, within reason. You don't have to totally put a fake smile on. But anyway, so a lot of that factors in. Obviously, you got to find out what kind of look they have, maybe what kind of gear. You do the best you can. There's a certain element of birds of a feather, and there's going to be things outside of your control as far as the reasons why they select you. But for me, I've always just said, hey, get a black V-neck, show up on time, play the right notes, get the right bass as much as you can, and, crack some jokes, laugh at some jokes, be polite, all those basic things that I actually learned. And a lot of us learn working normal jobs,
right.
If
basic social
basic social stuff. If you've never worked a job and pissed a boss off, go do that sometime and you'll be like, oh, that wasn't very fun. So just apply that on the road or with the band. So you're right, man, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. And then you put them on a bus, you put a bunch of musicians on a bus, you add another dynamic, it's very close quarters. So a lot of that behind the scenes stuff, you're right, factors in heavily to not only initial, but longevity in a gig and career. Part of doing music full time for me, I have really enjoyed the benefit of having more free time than I would had I been working part-time or full-time somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So I can take those opportunities and go, you know what? Yeah, I'll just block my whole stinking week off and just ate, slept and breathed those tunes and those instruments and got the mechanics down and got it second nature. And
When you were prepping for that utility gig, did you do everything by ear, or did you have charts, or was it a combination of both, or how'd you break those down?
I love the question, and I'll kind of answer it with some extra, and you can edit it if you don't like some of the stuff. But I'm pretty not passionate, but it's something that I deal with a lot because I do play a lot of different kinds of gigs. Mm-hmm. And so for me in a wedding band, I might do a number system chart, but then let's say I get to a song that has a very specific bass line and I don't have enough time to really, really commit it to memory. Man, I'll go into Sibelius music notation software and I'll write the bass line out and then maybe X's and then the chord symbols, so it's a hybrid chart. And then sometimes when I'm being real nerdy at home for my own practice and I'm transcribing, obviously it's a dots on the page, exact, loop a section, go over. So I kind of weave in and out of all of those, and all of them have benefited me greatly at one point or another in my career. I think it's very important for me, and I would encourage, especially bass players. I can definitely speak from that point of view, that want to play electric bass for a living and want to weave in and out of different genres. It's a huge help, man, because I can't tell you the times I've been called with 2 days notice or 1 day, and even just a quick cheat sheet with a low iPad, will help immensely. There's actually a pop artist that I played with that played a big show. We played the San Antonio Rodeo, and the night of, we flew in.
Can you say who it was?
I don't know. Sure. Yeah. That's all right. It was with Lauren.
Okay, cool.
And we were playing, Lauren Elena, and we were playing the next day, and they said, hey, we have this medley that we do. Our flight got in a little bit late. And I was like, oh man, okay, great. And I said, hey, I'm playing keyboard. What if I could hide kind of an iPad on my keyboard? Cause it was very guitar heavy. And I asked the band leader, and he said, man, yeah, it's out of sight, it's not a televised, I think it'll be okay. And so I made just a quick cheat sheet that I kind of tucked away, and just had a nice roadmap, and it just kind of helped me be just a little extra prepared, so anyway, so yeah, I think it's important, and it has helped me on a bunch of different kinds of gigs. So the specific question of with Lauren's gig, what I did is I just jumped right in with the instruments, started learning it by ear, and then we came into a new year with in Lauren's band where I actually moved instruments. I moved over to bass, and so my primary, and so I was like, okay, I know these tunes, I know the hooks and the licks, but now I'm going to get the exact bass part under my fingers, figure out what the guy on the album did. So With that, I had a little more time. And so, man, I went ahead and I went in and wrote a number chart, not with the hope to use it, but just to kind of help internalize it, the physical nature of writing something down. Yeah, and then I memorized the bass line.
Back in the old days, before you could Google lyrics, we used to listen. It's what did he say? And rewind the cassette. And writing the lyrics out, even if I didn't refer to them again, helped to memorize them, so I could.
That's so smart. There's so many lyrics. It's endless. It's you got chord patterns, but man, lyrics may get really hairy.
So just a couple more questions. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us, Matt. I really, really do. The day-to-day grind for you. What other avenues as a musician do you utilize to keep things coming in when there's no gigs on the books?
Yeah, man. I got married. I'm kidding. I was thinking in my head,
Thanks,
honey. I'm gonna make that joke. Right. Yeah.
I'll do it for you.
Right. No, man, thankfully, especially, locally where I live, I've done enough different kinds of work that usually at the bare minimum, something comes up in some form or another. Hey, here's a week or two of theater gigs with, paid rehearsals, local theaters, all I've really done. But then, hey, Matt, we're doing this project for, tracks for sync licensing, and we're going to pay you $100 to come in for a day to do bass. So living within my means, it's a funny answer, but that also knowing that when the bigger checks come in, to kind of keep that back and don't just go out and spend it all, knowing that it's going to equal out at some point. There's going to be a glut of gigs, even before COVID, et cetera. It's like, I just mentally know how it goes. There's an ebb and flow to it.
You've learned the cyclical pattern,
a little bit.
Tour. Let's go buy an ES335. Damn, it's fall. Nobody's touring.
Exactly.
Got to sell it to make rent. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And like you were saying earlier about the behind the scenes stuff, calendar, and man, I feel like I do devote quite a bit of time to the behind the scenes stuff, man, making sure my calendar's in order, checking my wedding band gigs against my, my main calendar, making sure I got those on there and not crossing wires and upsetting somebody. And then, making sure I've gotten better over the years at scheduling gigs next to one another in the right way to not upset a regular gig, but to know that I have enough time. If bus calls in Nashville and then I've got a church gig on Sunday, man, I should give myself a day of travel. I shouldn't try to, because man, something will happen, a tire will blow, etc. So just those little things of like knowing from doing something and messing up, I've made enough mistakes that I know, to not blow my money as much. Can't say I always do that, but save when I can, know how to stagger my schedule in a way that doesn't shoot myself in the foot. So when I am home, I'm not sitting around on the couch, and some of that plays into going and playing that gig in Texas with the singer-songwriter. It's like, man, if I'm coming right off a tour and I don't have any work, that might not be a bad seed to plant, even if the gig ends up being, not as like, the highest number I have in my head. It's like, oh, it's a little less, but that's going to get my foot in the door with them. It maybe get more work. Maybe they know somebody. They might be going into the studio. Also, all that being said, and I've got some other friends such as yourself and other people in the industry that there comes a point in time, man, you might have to liquidate some gear. You might have to go move some pianos. I've done that. You might have to get real creative, teach. I teach, I've got some virtual students. And then before all this crazy stuff, when I was in town, I would have, you get on with a music store or a company and they need you to be more regular. But if you do it independent, you can kind of, there's a little more flexibility on both sides.
Real quick, what's on the horizon for Matt Maxwell? What's next for you? What's going on,
man,
brother?
I have to mentally, as you're asking that, think about like, what is today? Because to be honest, the days have been running together. Maybe I'm not the only one. So I'm like, okay, New Year's Eve, that's coming up. I've got a gig there. And actually, before we met, I was running the tunes, just listening to them. It's an Americana-esque kind of style. So I'm just kind of getting those bass lines in my head, getting the format in my head. Then I'll probably chart them, and then I'll probably start learning them. So that's coming up this week. I've got some regular gigs. Actually, I have a gig tonight in a few hours. It's a local pub downtown, and the bandstand's far enough away, and they're doing the best they can with all the guidelines and stuff. So is the band. So I've got that coming up. I've got some wedding gigs. Hopefully, maybe you'll be on Summer one.
I'm on the Wavetones gig on the 9th.
All right.
I'm not
I'll
sure.
see you then, man.
Are you on that gig?
I think so. I'm pretty sure.
Oh,
yeah.
very
So
cool.
some
Well,
wedding stuff.
We can share stories and you can make fun.
Absolutely. And then Lauren has some stuff booked this summer, I think around June or July. I'm not 100% sure. They're on her site is where I saw those. And I was like, okay, great. I think they're festivals. Maybe they're doing the social distance thing. And, now with the vaccine and everything, it's like, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm hoping for some normalcy this year. I mean, whatever that's going to look like, I guess we'll find out. But Matt,
working on a book. Forgot to mention.
Oh, you are? Yeah, go for it. Yeah, let it out.
Oh, yeah. It just popped in my head. No big deal. It's not even ready. So, but my co-author and I've been working. Yeah, absolutely. My co-author and I've been working on it for about. It's been about a year. He tours with a Nashville artist, and I had the idea, and I was like, man, this guy knows way more than I ever will. So I need to pull him into the fold. And so he and I started writing a book. We're going to title it Hired Musician. We're about halfway through. It's going to kind of cover everything from literally how do you get a gig to the psychology of being on the road. Just honestly in line with some of the stuff we're talking about, the behind the scenes stuff, some real world. Hey, here's what to expect at this level of performance as far as pay, et cetera. Anyways, kind of a survival guide.
Well, very cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that. I've got links to your website up here. I'm going to make sure to put those in the description so people can check out your stuff. You are one hell of a bass player. I love working with you, and you're a good dude and a cool hang. And I thank you so much for your time, Matt.
Dude, I'm honored, and I feel the same way about you, brother. It's really nice to meet you, jam with you, virtual high five. And
yeah, man. I guess I'll see you on the 9th, brother. All right, man. That's Matt Maxwell, everybody. Give it up.
Thanks.
I will
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, man.
All right, everybody, give it up. That's Matt Maxwell. If you want to see more and hear more from Matt, you can find him at mattmaxwell.com. That's Matt with one T, mattmaxwell.com. He is currently co-authoring a book. It's kind of a how-to guide for musicians like us. Hopefully that will be out soon, so keep your eyes open for that. Also, Lauren Elena does have some dates on her website for the summer 2021. Let's hope those hold up. You may very well see Mr. Maxwell laying down the low end there. And if you get a chance to catch her show, you will not be disappointed. And if you get a chance to meet Mr. Maxwell, you'll be even more impressed. He's an amazing, amazing guy. So great of him to join us here on Sound Advice Podcast. Again, I am your host, Gino Medina, and I want to thank every single one of you for listening today. One more time, if you like what you see, like what you hear, please click like and subscribe, and we'll let you know what we're up to. And if you have any suggestions, just throw them in the comments below and let us know what you think. I am your host. I said that already. This is Gino Medina saying so long from Sound Advice. Bye-bye.